Have you ever noticed how much of life revolves around food? When someone gets married, we eat. We eat a lot. Christmas, we eat a lot. Birthdays, we eat the same. Sporting victory, we light a braai. Or even if we lose, we light a braai. We just need half an opportunity to light a braai. We eat together, we drink together. One man said, I cook with wine. Sometimes I even add it to the food. Jesus, I remind you, made wine at a wedding feast. To share a meal with someone is, of course, to make yourself vulnerable. You don't invite anybody home to eat with you. You're vulnerable because you're seated together at eye level in close proximity. You have to communicate or otherwise face an awkward silence. In the ancient world, you did not have a meal with your enemy. You see, food fills our stomachs, but shared meals with great connection, fills our hearts in a special way. Have you ever noticed how central meals are, in fact, in the Bible, in Christianity? Christianity is a surprisingly mealy religion. The Bible begins with food in a garden. Israel leaves Egypt with a meal. God feeds his people with bread from heaven, manna. Jesus is consistently eating with people. I don't know if you've noticed. Everywhere he goes, he's eating with someone. In fact, he leaves us with a meal to remember him, the Lord's Supper, Holy Communion. After his resurrection, I love this, he prepares breakfast for the disciples on the shore. The sun is just rising over the Sea of Galilee. 7 exhausted disciples stumble ashore after a night of catching nothing, only to find a charcoal fire already burning, fish cooking, fresh bread waiting, and the risen Jesus standing there. And what does Jesus say to them? He says, "Come and have breakfast." Most strikingly, the Bible ends with 2 meals. One is beautiful beyond imagination. Revelation speaks of the marriage supper of the Lamb, where Christ welcomes his people to a feast of everlasting joy, fellowship, and celebration. But only a few verses later, we encounter another meal, a terrible one. It's called the Great Supper of God, where the birds gather to feast on those who have rejected the King, rejected Christ. The contrast using 2 meals is deliberate and sobering. In the end, every one of us will be present at one of those 2 meals. Either we will sit at Christ's table as welcomed guests, or we will stand outside his kingdom under judgment. Now, all of that brings us to our text today, Exodus chapter 24. And the setting for our text is dramatic. Mount Sinai is covered in cloud. There is thunder, lightning, smoke, and fire. And after all the preparation, after the sacrifices, after the blood of the covenant, God does something wonderful in its ordinariness. He invites his people to a meal. We read this: Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement of lapis lazuli, as bright blue as the sky. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God and they ate and drank. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us what was on the menu, but it was a meal, and they were drinking, and that's the important thing. It was fellowship with God and with each other. They saw God and they ate and they drank together. Now, I've said this previously in my dealings with Exodus, but it needs to be said again. God's purpose was never simply to rescue Israel from Egypt. God's purpose was to bring them into fellowship with himself. That was the purpose. The meal was the destination. The connection was the goal. The fellowship with God was the ultimate plan. Now, that understanding brings me to some present day application. If you want a meal without God, if you want the salvation and the benefits without God, if you want prosperity, cult teachings, if you want Christianity without God, then you are truly lost. Adam and Eve had a meal without God, and see where that ended them. You see, the prize is to see God, to know God, to be with God. The prize of Christianity, the prize of the Bible is fellowship, the fellowship that the meal symbolizes. That is the grand prize, to be reconnected to God. The gospel, the Bible, is ultimately an invitation to sit at God's table, an invitation to fellowship. From the beginning to the end, the story of the Bible is a story of a God who wants his people to sit at his table. With every meal, Jesus was saying, there is room at my table. As I shared on the night before he died, Jesus gave us the Lord's Supper. I guess he could have left us a monument or a statue, but he didn't. He left us a meal. The Bible ends, as I've shared, with two meals. One where the birds feast on those who have been cast out, no fellowship with God. And then the wedding feast of the Lamb, where everyone who has accepted God's invitation sits down to eat and have fellowship with God. At the wedding feast, there's no committee meeting. It's a meal. And so everything purposes towards two scenarios. One where there is no fellowship with God, and one where there is fellowship with God, symbolized by a meal. Now, as an aside, as I move to a close, real family meals on earth are not tidy and rigid. They are intimate and affectionate and emotional sometimes and messy, and children will spill cool drink, and someone will ask where the tomato sauce is, and someone will go back for seconds and pretend they only wanted another bread roll. We'll laugh, we'll talk, we'll share a table, we'll share stories, and it all may seem like a small, ordinary thing. But perhaps today we'll see it differently. Every shared meal is a small reminder of something much bigger, that God created us for fellowship, not only with one another, but ultimately with Him. It's all about fellowship with God, and flowing from that, fellowship with each other. I close. The greatest threat to the church today is not the government or a lack of passion. I've shared this as well. The greatest threat to the church today is a lack of fellowship. Without fellowship, there's no table. Without fellowship, there's no connection. And without fellowship, there's no love. And if the world cannot see our love for each other, then there is nothing to see, no proof of the gospel. Jesus said that people will know us to be His by our love for one another. And so the ultimate pinnacle of Christianity is not salvation. It is restored fellowship with God and restored fellowship with each other. Our history ends with a meal, with fellowship, with unhindered, beautiful, everlasting connection. May God bless you with the understanding of what it means to have fellowship with Him and fellowship with others. Amen.